Childhood nostalgia is a crazy thing. Games that we played as kids can go on to be some of our favorite games, just because we were like 2 and it was the best thing we'd ever played at the time. One of my first memories ever is being 2 years old and playing my first ever video game, SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. I have a distinct memory of just circling around the Krusty Krab and hanging out near this trash can. And speaking of trash cans, this game is not the best. Oh, and this background music that you're hearing right now, it plays for about half of the entire game. This game was SpongeBob's first attempt at a 3D platformer, and suffice it to say, it's a real sponge fuck. Is that a term? Can I say that? But fast forward to the year 2003, and our guy Sponge would give it another try. And let's just say, he blew us out of the water with this one. SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom is probably the best SpongeBob game to date, and it's a cult classic for a lot of 3D platformer fans, myself included. It perfectly captures the essence of the show's humor, locations, and characters, except for Mr. Krabs,
SpongeBob, your treasure chest,
to make for a fantastic game that even non-fans can probably enjoy. Just one problem though. For all the praise I give this game, I've actually never completed it, and that's kind of my thing. So good evening everyone, my name is Jahnhub and today I'm 100%ing SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. What nautical nonsense will I get up to this time? Am I hyping this game up a bit too much and it's pure nostalgia talking? Or is this unironically in like my top 20 favorite games? Find out all of this and more right now. Oh! This game actually has a somewhat complex story that takes a good amount of media literacy to understand and appreciate fully, but I'll try to explain it simply to the best of my ability. So we got this green guy, right? His name is Plankton. I know this game's called SpongeBob, but just bear with me here. He's tinkering in his laboratory that he also sells food out of, when he unveils his newest invention, the Duplicatatron 3000. He uses this to make robots that'll steal his rival's recipe, the Krabby Patty secret formula. Not only that, but the robots will also wreak havoc in the city because Plankton is evil. He makes a ton of robots, but just when he thinks everything is going alright, he forgot to turn one of the switches from don't obey to obey, so they are not obeying him. And this is just one of many of those complex yet subtle details that I was talking about. We then cut to SpongeBob playing robots and racehorses with his friend Patrick. This is called a cinematic parallel for those who don't know. SpongeBob remarks, "I wish there were real robots." Just then, Patrick performs a magic spell or hex of some sort to bring robots to Bikini Bottom. Oh great, so this is all his fault? Nice, great work man. No it's not. SpongeBob vows to save the town with his friends Patrick and Sandy, and the whole game is spent going level to level, defeating the robot threat, collecting all sorts of things, and stopping Plankton, who is actually the one behind all this stuff. Are you sold yet? SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is a 3D platformer and a collectathon, so the way we complete this game is by collecting a lot of thingies. You can collect shiny objects, which are a currency of sorts. You use them to open up areas of the level, as well as pay for other collectibles. There's an infinite amount of these shiny objects as they do respawn, which is good because you need like 150,000 of them to get everything. You can also collect 80 pairs of Patrick's stank-ass cum socks, their name, not mine. Trading 10 socks gives you what you're really looking for, and that's golden spatulas. These are the Mario stars of Battle for Bikini Bottom, and they're used to access new levels as well as boss battles. There are 100 golden spatulas in total, and we'll be collecting every single one of them, of course. I was trying to think of how best to document my journey through each level, while also highlighting some of the more tricky spatulas and socks in the game, and I think a ranked list is the way to go. Battle for Bikini Bottom has 9 main levels with the town of Bikini Bottom as a hub to connect all of them. Almost every level has a cute little taxi stop to bring you there, and there's a couple with creative entrances. You can fast travel between not only every level, but there's also checkpoints for each spatula in every level that you can warp to as well. It's honestly pretty impressive and not a lot of collectathons do this. Bikini Bottom itself has 3 main areas, each with a spatula requirement and a boss fight needed to proceed. For the sake of this ranked list, I'm only taking into consideration the 9 main levels, and I'll throw the Bikini Bottom hub in to make it a top 10 list. We can worry about the boss fights later. So starting at number 10 is Kelp Forest. Kelp Forest is the only level in Battle for Bikini Bottom that I would outright say is bad. It's probably one of my least favorite levels in any game I grew up with, to be honest. There's not a single spatula or sock that feels good to collect in this one. There's a ton of ideas for challenges that range from could have been good but aren't to
What the fuck were they thinking?
the main objective of this level is to help Mrs. Puff find her students that got lost in the forest. This is one of a few examples of Mrs. Puff being characterized as negligent or reckless in this game, which wasn't really a part of her character in the show, but it's like a recurring bit in this game. The first major section of Kelp Forest introduces you to a new enemy type and shows off these leaves that bounce you. There's a couple branching paths that lead to either students or socks, and I really can't tell if I collected any of these in the developer intended way. The next section has Mr. Krabs tasking Patrick with throwing 3 tiki heads on buttons to open a gate. Playing through this part, I found myself making jumps that didn't look possible, all with the thread of goo that resets your progress if you fall in. After that is a section that's the most interesting from an idea perspective, but it's also the worst part of the level. You navigate through a dark cave that requires you to throw tiki heads on buttons with Patrick, and then swap to SpongeBob to hit buttons with the cruise bubble. There's this cool teamwork dynamic that isn't really present anywhere else in the game, and it would be a really great idea if there was maybe a button that would help you swap characters between SpongeBob and Patrick, but the only way to switch characters is at bus stops, of which there's one in this entire section at the very beginning. The final part of this level is a super long and difficult slide. There's a good amount of slides in this game, but this one is the absolute hardest. There's twists and turns everywhere, not to mention there's a spatula for beating the slide in under 1 minute and 40 seconds, so you really have to optimize your pathing. There's also a stupid ass sock that requires you to make a precise jump onto a leaf, and it's the only sock that I had to look up in my whole playthrough. Also, I don't know who was in charge of the lighting for this level, but I can't see anything, man! This level gets a 1 out of 10. Maybe a 0 actually. At the number 9 spot is the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. Like any other level, the Flying Dutchman's domain is being overrun by robots, and he promises a golden spatula if SpongeBob can get rid of them. Now when you think of the Flying Dutchman, what do you think of? If you said green goo fucking everywhere, platforms you have to push in with the perfect formation to progress, or a half-baked wall jump mechanic that barely works, congratulations, because that's exactly what the level is. It isn't a bad level per se. It is usually the level you'll play right after Kelp Forest, so that isn't great, but the general atmosphere and vibe of the level do convey the feeling of spooky ghost graveyard pretty well. To me, this one has a somewhat confusing level design. For starters, there's 3 socks, which is the least amount of any main level. The first one is on this platform that I do not know how to reach other than making this awkward jump as SpongeBob. You can play as Sandy later in the level, so I'm assuming it has something to do with her. The second sock is hidden inside the hull of this boat that you can only see if you were to flip the camera around in this very spot. It's well hidden, but I don't think they did a good job of hiding it, if that makes sense. And the third one is in plain sight towards the end of the level. The spatulas in this one range from weird to almost kinda cool. There's one at the very beginning of the level that requires you to shoot a sponge torpedo at a cover to stop the flow of green goo. There's a time segment where you have to use the Spongeball power-up to navigate through a course. There's spatulas strewn throughout the level just for getting to certain milestones. And the final parts of this level are cool conceptually, but that's about it. You have to man cannons to shoot at an enemy pirate ship, which just consists of ground pounding on buttons as SpongeBob. You sink the enemy ship, thus helping out the Dutchman, but the bastard goes back on his word and decides to keep the golden spatula to himself. You then engage in a mini boss fight against him as Sandy, and it's pretty boring. You'd think for a guy who's basically the devil or the Grim Reaper of the SpongeBob universe, he'd be pretty formidable, but no. You let him shoot eye lasers in a predictable pattern and then lasso his tail thing 3 times. Y'all think he shits out of there? The Mermalayer is my number 8 pick, and while it's a pretty fun level, it definitely wins the award for least true to its show counterpart. By that I mean the Mermalayer in the show is just a cave with a computer and some gadgets, but in this game it's a ton of metal platforms, slides, hazards, and way too much open space. Haters will call me out for trying to apply logic to a video game, but how could Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy possibly navigate this place? Well, they must find a way because they're on all corners of the map giving SpongeBob tasks. They took a lot of creative liberties with this level because the spatula objectives are things like hit the buttons in perfect order so all these thingies are facing the right way, fight Prawn, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's sworn enemy by throwing bowling balls at him, and who could forget the Rube Goldberg machine from hell. If anyone remembers this level, it's probably for this spatula. There's a series of switches to flip, stage pieces to modify, and buttons to press in order to get a ball into a hole that'll open a glass case covering a golden spatula. You could put 1,000,000 trained gamers in front of this one, and most of them probably couldn't do this on their first try. It could just be a skill issue on my end, but there's just so much trial and error involved in this one to get the timings just right. And the hardest part is at the very end, you have to balance the ball on a wooden platform so it doesn't fall off, and it always falls off. I eventually got this one, but I gotta say, geez Louise, man. Sand Mountain is at the number 7 spot solely because when I was 7 years old, I tried to find the 8 hidden snowmen for so long that I peed my pants. True story, I can't tell you exactly why this happened, as I don't really remember the moments leading up to the piss, but you have to go down this mountain at least 2 to 3 times and take different paths to find all 8 hidden snowmen, and if you fall off the track or run out of health, you have to start all over again. My best guess as to what happened is I didn't want to go to the bathroom, lest I forget where any of the snowmen I already found were. So anyway, I've been calling this level Pee Your Pants Mountain for close to 20 years now, and jokes aside, it's a fun one. It's definitely the most unique premise for a level. You start in this mountain lodge area where you can find a couple socks and spatulas, and there's 3 different courses to slide down. This level's like 90% slide. You could play as Sandy who slides using a shell like in the show, or SpongeBob who uses his nasty ass tongue, also like in the show. There's a spatula for sliding down each course successfully, and another for beating a time that an NPC supposedly set on this course. You're telling me Mrs. Puff skated a 110 on Guppy Mound? Yeah, fucking right. Not much more to talk about with the socks in this level, as you already heard how that went. And yeah, pretty good level. Not quite as good as the other ones on the list. P. Number 6 is Jellyfish Fields, the first main level in the game. It has the important job of introducing the player to pretty much every major system and mechanic in the game, and it does a pretty good job. In the opening section of the level, Jellyfish Field shows the player how to fight enemies, look for hidden passageways and levels, gain access to areas with shiny object requirements. It showcases the box teleport system, where if you find 2 cardboard boxes, you can use them to warp to the other side of the map. In the first 5 minutes of this level, you learn all this, and kudos to the level designers because it doesn't feel overwhelming in the slightest. You end the area by collecting a golden spatula, and in the next area you're introduced to more mechanics, sliding, fighting enemies that respawn, swapping characters, and then when you swap to Patrick for the first time, there's an entire tutorial section on how to play him. This level has a lot to say, and my 7-year-old ass sat and listened. And peed too. But not everything is perfect about this one. There's this cave that's pretty lame, to be honest. It drags on for a bit too long, and while it does provide some intermediate tutorials on how Patrick works, it's definitely the weakest part of the level. The biggest thing of note with this level though is despite it being the first level, there's 2 socks that require you to have the bowling ball and cruise bubble, abilities that SpongeBob only unlocks after defeating the first and second bosses. So you have to backtrack in order to 100% this level. There's only one other level that I can think of that does this sort of thing, and then the need to backtrack never shows up again. This is more me pointing out a weird consistency than a genuine criticism of the level, but it's worth mentioning nonetheless. You have this long area that introduces SpongeBob to different types of tiki heads, as well as introduces the wall jump mechanic, before we get to the last section, a mini-boss fight against King Jellyfish. In order to beat him, you need to avoid him until he stops floating, then jump over his sting move that comes out way too fast and hit him 3 times. Beating him awards you his jelly, which Squidward needs for some reason. The level ends with a slide before you return to Squidward to get your spatula. This is a good level, it's not great, but I think the placement is fair. Number 5. Downtown Bikini Bottom. At the very start of the level, you run into Mrs. Puff, whereas in the Kelp Forest level, she's characterized as being negligent, reckless, and anxious. Here she's a touch more responsible, but I know she's plotting something. She tasks SpongeBob with finding steering wheels across the city so the townspeople can evacuate in their vehicles. The level itself is fairly straightforward in the first area, it's just the street level of the city itself. There's a segment where you need to use a cannon to destroy tiki heads in order to press buttons for a spatula. There's shortcuts that make the level much easier once you get to certain points, and this level is our introduction to Sandy as a playable character. I'd say she's the most fun out of the 3, mainly due to her lasso that can tie up enemies from a distance, let her hover in the air, as well as grapple onto Texas-shaped thingies in the sky. You traverse a bit as Sandy until you reach the rooftops of downtown Bikini Bottom, where Sandy's aerial and movement abilities can really shine. There's some tricky socks and even spatulas in this area. I always seem to forget at least one thing in this area whenever I play this game. And at the end there's a combat challenge for SpongeBob. You fight waves of enemies, destroy enemy generators, and use these bouncy guys to get a cheeky sock at the top of the tower. It's all pretty fun and memorable. The last area is off to the side of the first part of the city, and it's the Sea Needle. Here you can help Mr. Krabs defeat robots, I think. Not sure why he would care. Also, can we talk about how that's clearly not Clancy Brown?
Yes, it is.
Ahoy, me boy! I like currency! The most notable part of this area is actually not the hooks that reveal SpongeBob's sponge crack, but rather there's a spatula and sock that can only be obtained after you obtain the cruise bubble from the second main boss. For reference, downtown Bikini Bottom appears a few levels before you fight the first main boss, Again, it's not the worst thing in the world replaying parts of a level later on in the game with new abilities, but Battle for Bikini Bottom makes you backtrack exactly 3 times that I can recall, and they all happen within this level and Jellyfish fields. And you aren't really even backtracking in a way that reinvents the level or provides really any new challenge. You kind of just come back for 2 seconds, use your newfound ability, and leave. This could have been an email, guys.
Goo Lagoon.
This level introduces the Viking helmet, a move SpongeBob has that I completely forgot about while writing this script because it's pretty underutilized. SpongeBob leaps up in the air and can hit things above him with a bubble Viking hat. There's a few people to help in this one. Larry needs you to redirect the lights on some lifeguard stands, I think. Alright, the main objective of really any level is someone wants SpongeBob to do some roundabout thing to destroy all the robots. That's just how it is in every level. Although just a bit later on, you run into Mrs. Puff, whose reckless side is very prominent in this one, as she once again lost track of all of her students. SpongeBob has to use the Viking helmet to pop the kids' balloons and get them to safety. Sometimes though you pop the balloons and they fall into the goo, which is funny. This level's got a sand castle, it's got an area where you can infinitely farm shiny objects, there's a cave where the tide rises and lowers, and then the last area is a huge carnival where there's a ton of objectives and activities for SpongeBob and Patrick to complete. The only somewhat weak parts of this one are this Patrick platforming section with the floating towels because it's so long, this platforming section with a golden spatula off to the side that I always forget about, and the level warps you back to the starting zone after the carnival and you destroy one robot, and it feels a bit anticlimactic. All of that aside, this level is huge, it has a ton to do, there's a ton of creative challenges. Jolly good show, Sponge, jolly good show. My number 3 spot is the Bikini Bottom hub. I kinda have to put it on here as it does have the most iconic locations in the show. The game starts in SpongeBob's house, which is fully explorable, including his huge study from a couple episodes. They have Squidward's house where you can be a complete nuisance for a sock and a golden spatula. Patrick's house has one couch made of sand which you can destroy for a sock as well. And that's just the first area of Bikini Bottom. After the first few levels and the first boss, you get to go to Sandy's Tree Dome and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's retirement home. I do wish there were a full level in Sandy's Tree Dome, but having to fight a huge wave of robots in a confined space like the Tree Dome is objectively cool. You even get to play as dehydrated, crusty SpongeBob, which is really just a testament to this game's attention to detail and amazing ability to pull references from the first couple seasons of the show. The third and final area has the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket. The Krusty Krab has a big robot fight, and the Chum Bucket has a fight with a big robot. I feel like Bikini Bottom as a hub world is pretty much perfect. All the really important stuff is there, and I don't want to change a thing. At number 2 is Rock Bottom, home of the iconic Miss Puff line, "Don't ask questions you aren't prepared to handle the answer to." The objective of this one is to retrieve stolen pieces of artwork and return them to Miss Puff, and she says the line after SpongeBob asks why she wants the artwork in the first place. This is unfortunately the last level where we see Mrs. Puff acting reckless to her students, or in this case just shady. So would everyone now put down your phone, swap back to this tab if you're listening in the background, or put down your food, and please rise for the ode to Miss Puff.
You're asking why I need those paintings, like you expect I'll really answer you. Well, it'd be best to heed my one suggestion: don't ask questions that you're not prepared to hear the answer to. You can help me if you wanna. You're lucky that I even let you try. I'll gift a spatula of gold once you get back the works they stole, and bring them here and don't ask why. Every time I try to lose you, I lose the students that actually have a chance or two. It's destroying when you pester me, annoying me with questions that you don't really want the answers to. So help me wrinkle up my pupils. I was grading papers when they wandered off in there. Oh, you already found them all. Well, look, I just graded yours, SpongeBob. Another F.
This is a great level. I was definitely not a huge fan as a kid, but I've grown to love this one. The outdoor areas blend together pretty seamlessly. There's a few points where you have to maneuver around swiftly with the Spongeball, a seldom used power-up that just makes SpongeBob a ball for some reason, and there's a lot of parts that require Sandy's schmovement abilities, which are my favorite parts. The most memorable part of the level for sure is the museum. You have to avoid lasers like you're in a heist movie, all while fighting off robots and escaping through to the other side. It's a great change up to an otherwise dark, dreary, outdoorsy level. The worst thing I can say about this one is it does run out of steam a tad bit at the end. Like when you have to deactivate Plankton's lasers, or especially with this long stealth section, where you have to move at a snail's pace not to get shit on by these robots. But if that's the worst I can think of, it's still a pretty goated level, but not as goated as number 1, SpongeBob's Dream. I didn't do a lot of searching around to see what levels this game's fanbase likes the most, but you gotta admit this is definitely the most memorable level in the whole game. It's ominous as hell too. When you first get to the third area of Bikini Bottom, you see taxis that lead to Kelp Forest and the Dutchman's graveyard, as well as the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket. But there's also this rock circle that definitely never showed up in the show. You interact with it, and SpongeBob immediately falls asleep. Did someone cast a hex on him? Does Plankton play like that? Child me had many questions. You're then greeted by a dreamlike world with 3D models of all the characters in the sky, and then maybe some of the most difficult platforming in the game at the very start of this level. If we're only taking level design into consideration, from like the perspective of this level's challenges and the way the platforms are placed or the way the course is planned out, this probably wouldn't be the best level. I just love the concept so much that I'm still thinking about this level 20 years later. I honestly don't know if I love or hate this level too, but it activates my brain the most. Does that make sense? Like there's a whole segment where you go into Squidward's dream and platform on musical instruments, notes, and Squidward's big ass nose and clarinet at one point, and that's awesome. But there's also this part where you need to balance on a ball and grab a spatula, and it takes me like 10 tries every time I play this game. You have Sandy's dream where you have to slide through the most patriotic, Texas-ass environment ever conceived in a video game, but then there's these yucky oil bubble enemies that always attack faster than I do. The crowning achievement though is of course Patrick's dream, where it's just a black room with Patrick who gives you a spatula just for talking to him, and then a fancy gate to exit afterwards. I think this is what the kids are calling a liminal space. This level definitely reads as the last level they designed, but I think it also has everything. Platforming, combat, sliding. It's the final skill check before the final boss just to make sure you've mastered the game. And guess what, SpongeFuck? I did. And that's every level in the game. But there's always much more to talk about when it comes to completing games.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
You can call me a negative Nancy all you want. Go ahead, write it in the comments, get it out of your system. But with every 100% comes some really annoying bits. I think 3 general annoying things come to mind when it comes to 100%ing Battle for Bikini Bottom, one of which I've already touched on. I hope you're not too tired of these listicles that I'm doing, but here's the 3 things that were pretty annoying to do when 100%ing this game. The physics in this game are a little weird. I like it a lot in platformers when you can save yourself from a jump gone wrong. If SpongeBob is hit by any hazard in the game, chances are he's flying off the side of the screen, or landing in a spot that you really wouldn't expect, or just flat out dying. There's some enemy types later on too that'll shoot things at you as you try to jump, and it's pretty much guaranteed death if you're hit at any point by these enemies. This didn't happen to me though, because I'm kind of a pro gamer and this game is for babies and kids who pee their pants. I'm just looking out for the little guys all. Pretty much everything about shiny objects is annoying. Shiny objects are used for clam tolls, which give you access to more parts of the level and are mostly mandatory. The Mermalayer has a toll specifically for getting 1 sock, and that kinda sucks. Also, I feel like in a perfect world, if you're thorough enough with collecting shiny objects, you should be able to buy everything by the time the 100% is nearly done. But that was not the case here. There are 2 massive expenses that we have in this game. One is Mr. Krabs, who gives you multiple golden spatulas just for trading him shiny objects, and the other is a movie theater which costs 40,000 shiny objects to gain entrance to. Spoiler alert, the movie theater is just a slideshow of concept art, which granted is pretty cool, but not worth the grind in my opinion. The one saving grace is there's this spot in Goo Lagoon where you can destroy all the tiki heads in the area, drown yourself, then do it all over again. After a 30-minute or so grind here, I was able to get everything in the game. Lastly, I want to talk about the bosses. The bosses in this game take so long to beat. I remember as a kid I used to fight them over and over again for fun, but doing it today felt like an absolute chore. There are 3 major bosses in this game: Robot Sandy, Robot Patrick, and Robot SpongeBob, and they all follow the same basic formula. The bosses are invulnerable and attack wildly for 20 to 30 seconds until they get tired, then you have to damage them 9 times until you win. By virtue of being just a little bit different, Robot SpongeBob is probably the best boss fight since you can damage him quicker if you're skillful, and instead of having something like a second phase where he's stronger, he just eats you and you have to fight him from the inside. For that reason, I respect his game and hustle, and bestow Robot SpongeBob with the award for Best Boss Fight in a great game that has great levels, except for that one level, but kind of mid-boss fights. No, you cannot bring the award home with you, you have to return it to the council after the ceremony. In a river of mid and downright unfun Nickelodeon games, shouts out Nicktoons Unite, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom remains the very best. For all there was to talk about, this game only took about 8 hours to complete 100%. Should you, the viewer, complete this game? Yeah, I think so. Beating versus completing this game is only a couple hours difference, so why not? Also, this game was good enough to get a remake a few years ago, so it's probably saying something. I mean, hell, this game made me piss my pants, it's gotta be pretty good. Thank you all for watching. In case you were wondering about my take on the remake, it's fine. The movement and mechanics actually feel a little bit worse to me in some ways than the original, but the visuals are no doubt a major improvement. The original, by comparison, does have a bit of an uncanny valley effect if I'm being honest. I mean, I like it because I love this game growing up, but dry SpongeBob could definitely make a child cry. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Did you know that actually 0% of my viewers are subscribed? That's messed up, man.